and I'm going to go through the introduction, but on your screen you will see a few helpful notes for attending a WebEx event. So if you're not familiar with WebEx, feel free to listen to the intro and then read over these, and then we will turn it over to the team. So again, good evening. My name is Patrick Fandel from the Mayor's Office Neighborhood Services. This is an application by the Heritage Club for a recreational cannabis establishment to be operated at the address of 116 Cambridge Street, Boston, Massachusetts. We are joined tonight, this evening, by the applicant and her project team. Before we start, I would like to go over my expectations for tonight's meeting. I've participated in multiple meetings of this kind, so I know that they can be pretty sensitive. I cover Dorchester for the mayor's office, but I'm sure it's just as passionate in Charlestown. So I'm sure all of you will be very engaged in this. I just want to be clear that no decisions are being made this evening, and at no time will it be acceptable to be disrespectful to anyone during the meeting. I know everyone is entitled to their own opinion. There's no right or wrong opinion. We're just here tonight to try to collect as many comments and questions for this proposal as possible. I'm really not here to debate or get into arguments about state legislation surrounding marijuana. I know folks have many opinions on that. This is just to discuss the merits of this proposal and the application for this address. When we get to comments, questions, and concerns, I ask that they be directed toward the applicant or myself only. You're more than welcome to engage your neighbors outside of this meeting, and I'm happy to have extended conversations with you outside of this meeting as well, but please direct all questions to myself or the applicant. The applicant will answer all questions related to this proposal to the best of their ability, and I will answer any questions specific to the city process. We're also joined by some folks from the Office of Economic Development and Boston Transportation to answer any questions specific to those departments. If I'm unable to, or the applicant is unable to answer any questions tonight, we will happily get back to you after the meeting with the information you requested. There will be an open comment period for the duration of this application. So if you don't get called on tonight, or if you have questions after this meeting that you didn't get to ask, feel free to reach out to us and we will happily get you the information. My contact information was on the flyer for this meeting, and I will put it in the chat for folks as well. There will be no questions during the presentation. The presentation will go first. And once we have concluded that presentation, we will move into comments and questions. We will go through the presentation. It should take no more than about 20 minutes, and then there'll be plenty of time to ask questions after that. In the duration of the presentation, if you have a comment, feel free to utilize the chat at the bottom of the screen. I'm now going to hand it over to the applicants to get started on the presentation. So with that, Nikki, I'm going to give you presentation powers, and I'm going to turn it over to your team.
Great. Nikki, if you want to share your screen. Fantastic. Good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Silverman. I'm from the law firm of Vicente Cedarberg, and I'm here for the Heritage Club. This is a community outreach meeting regarding Heritage Club's intent to locate a marijuana retail establishment at 116 Cambridge Street. The community outreach meeting is one of the initial steps in the state licensing process. It's also part of the local Boston licensing process. We had previously held a community outreach meeting, but the Boston Cannabis Board, when we were meeting with them, suggested that we do some additional work on this project. They wanted us to get a traffic study done on the project and also to engage in some further dialogue, and that's why we're having this additional meeting tonight, and we're happy to talk to you about the project tonight, and going forward, happy to have you reach out and discuss anything that we don't answer for you tonight. Next slide, please. So one of the core values of the company as we go forward is giving back to the community. And so, you know, we're going to get into that as we go further along, but it's really something that when Nikki engaged us, you know, it was important to her. Nikki's a social equity applicant for a license. And I think, you know, part of the ethos there is that she views this as a great opportunity for herself and is cognizant of the benefits of being a social equity applicant and also wants to give back to this neighborhood, to this community in multiple ways, as we're going to discuss. And so it's really our hope that we can work with all of you to make this business fit seamlessly into the neighborhood. Next slide, Nikki. Thanks, Nikki. I'm going to let Nikki introduce herself. She's the founder and owner of the company. So Nikki, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your plans? Go ahead, Nikki. There you go.
All right, thanks. Sorry about that, guys. I'm used to Zoom. So yeah, my name's Nikki. My full name's Adenike, as you see there. Born and raised in Boston, and I got into cannabis because I realized there's a lot, not just giving back to the community, but in the history of the war on drugs and how we got here. That's what interested me in this space. I joined the social equity program about a year and a half ago and took 6 months of classes. I have been living in Boston for the first few years of my life, and I'm now back in Dorchester. I am part of BNI Legacy, which is out of Knights of Columbus, Charlestown. Once we're back in person, we'll be meeting there again, and we meet every Wednesday morning, just helping local businesses grow and network. And yeah, I'm really excited to be applying, and thank you guys for coming out.
Awesome, thank you. Next slide, Nikki. Great. With these types of companies, what you try to do is put together sort of a wide variety of advisors and consultants. On some level, it's not that complicated a business. On a certain level, this is really a convenience store. It's just a highly regulated convenience store with significant security. So, but we've gone out and we've really met with a number of people. Robin Reed, as you can see, really from the medical side, is a great help here. Lori Lucien, again, the legal side, has also been of significant help. Next slide, Nikki. And numerous strategic partners and consultants. Again, we've got people that are used to designing these retails. We have a delivery company that eventually we'll be working with here. There's, as I said, you can see by the list here, Century Bank does the banking here, and sophisticated, insurance, legal counsel, etc. I will just take a minute to tell you a little bit about myself and how we're involved with this. My firm is called Vicente Cedarberg, and we specialize in regulatory compliance. And we believe that when the voters approved adult use legalization of marijuana, they also voted for a system that demanded steadfast adherence to the laws and regulations at both the state and local level. And that's what we work with our clients to ensure. So we meet with the city councilors and the planning and the zoning boards and the health commissioners and the neighbors and the other stakeholders to craft operational procedures that address these local concerns. And we help clients implement these procedures. We even do things like conduct surprise inspections to make sure that they're following those procedures even when we're not there. And our clients and the states and the local communities they operate in have been very satisfied with our work so far. We have offices in every state that's legalized marijuana in the country. And our Boston office, where I work, has experience working with over 100 cities and towns in Massachusetts with over 100 clients in Massachusetts. So we look forward to working with the city, and in particular this neighborhood, to implement a vision that works for you for a legalized cannabis retail establishment. Next slide, please, Nikki. Why heritage? Really, as I mentioned before, a lot of what this is about, the social equity piece that Nikki is a part of, trying to give people some opportunities here. Because of that, and because of that background, I think it's very important for Nikki to have a diverse and inclusive business, again, owned and operated by somebody locally from Boston. And we're community focused. In particular, I wanted to talk to you about the item E, educational offerings. One of the things that we do, and this is really important for any cannabis company, especially because of the neighbors that we have around, is we educate these consumers when they come in. When our customers come in, the first thing they do is we give them information that basically says, look, this is a privilege to be able to be in a facility like this. So you don't have to purchase this product on the black market anymore. But with that comes a certain amount of responsibility. So you cannot go out and use this product on site. You just can't do that. You can't use it in public, in the neighborhood. And we let them know, if we see you do that, we will be reporting you to the local authorities, okay? That is grounds at the state level for losing our license if we allow people to do that. And so we're very clear right up front with customers. These are the rules. Same thing about driving under the influence. We're very clear about these things right from the outcome. We don't want anybody to say that they just didn't understand this. We make it clear right up front. We also have first-time customers sign a community norms agreement, which says that they understand these rules and that they know that if they break the rules, they won't be allowed to come back to this facility and, again, potentially have the local authorities called on them. And we found that this has been pretty successful in getting the point across. And Massachusetts now has 97 retailers across the state. And I would challenge you to find any that are having difficulties in the surrounding neighborhood. There was one in Brookline, Netta, that, you know, it was basically a bit of a traffic problem because that was the only dispensary for a number of years that's basically been serving the entirety of Boston and Brookline. So you can imagine with about 1 million people with one facility, there's going to be issues. That is about to go away, though, okay? We are going to see that by the time this facility opens up, you'll probably have 200 retailers in Massachusetts. And so any of the issues surrounding traffic and such, we believe that's going to go away. That's what we've seen in other places, Colorado, Arizona, Washington, where legalization has come, and the numbers have meant that really this is going to be just like any other business, not all that different from what you might see around a convenience store, a coffee shop, a liquor store, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Again, diversity and inclusion being so important to Nikki, you know, we're going to be partnering with vendors from diverse backgrounds. We're going to promise to purchase 30% of products from other economic empowerment and social equity vendors and 30% from women-owned vendors. Again, the idea is to give back and continue to promote the diversity and inclusion that's so essential to this company. Next slide, Nikki. Positive impact plan. There's a couple of things, you know, that specifically we're looking at to try to give back to the community. One thing that we're looking to do is create what we call the Lost Village Community Trust. And what we're hoping to find is some people from the community who will sit on a board with people from the company. And we will donate 3% of annual net profits to this entity. And that board will decide what those funds can be used for in the community. So again, if there's, you know, issues in the community that are of concern, I know, you know, having heard some of the outreach that's been done before, a variety of issues. We're going to make funds available to address those types of issues, okay? We want to have a positive impact on those issues, and that's the idea behind the Lost Village Community Trust. Similarly, one of the other programs we're going to be doing, what we call the Boston Heritage Fund, it's going to be a home buying assistance program. Idea is to cover the closing costs for 10 residents who are new home buyers. It would be closing costs up to $150,000 a year, so approximately $15,000 per qualifying resident under this program, which we think, you know, is an attainable goal, and we think it's important, obviously, as well. Next slide, please. Employment, again, we're looking at hiring 20 to 30 people, again, from diverse backgrounds. We do prefer to have Charlestown residents. That is a preference in hiring. We think it's important, again, being the host community, but it also, we find that people in the neighborhood are the best types of employees you can have because they know the neighborhood, they know the community, and they're just particularly adept at serving the neighborhood very well. But we're also looking to have, 51% women employed, 51% people of color. We're really looking for diverse backgrounds. And these are good jobs. They provide living wages, currently $16.70 an hour, health insurance, and other types of benefits. Next slide, please. Community support. So we've been working hard to try to reach out to the community. We've had various people in local government who have provided support, various residents who've provided letters of support. We understand not everybody is thrilled about this, okay? That's just par for the course in the legalization of cannabis as you go across the state and across the country. All we can pledge is that you will have a willing partner to do this the right way and ensure this is done safely and securely. And I think we've got some support from people who have confidence in us that we can achieve that goal. Next slide, Nikki. So here's the proposed site, 116 Cambridge Street. Again, it's very close to public transit. We'll talk about that. There is dedicated customer parking, 11 spaces. And it's a standalone building, which is good for security. You don't have another tenant that sort of diverts attention from operations. So that's all a positive. Next slide, please. Here's a village and street view of the area. Most of you are probably quite familiar with it. Next slide. Again, this is an idea of what the building is going to look like. It's very discreet. This is not supposed to have neon signs, flashing signs. People that want to use, want to buy cannabis at this facility, they tend to know about this online. Leafly, Weed Maps, these types of sites are where they learn about where they are. We don't need flashy advertising, that sort of thing. People will know about it. And as you can see, right now what we're thinking about is really a pretty discreet, building. I would almost say plain, but the idea is not to stand out like a sore thumb, blend in with the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Zoning, again, we fit within the appropriate zoning for this type of an establishment in Boston. We are more than 1,000 feet from the nearest school, more than 500 feet from the nearest church, and over a half mile from any other cannabis establishment. Next slide, please. So I'll touch on security just to give you a sense of why these places are so safe, just the degree of security. So the first thing I'll explain to you, this is what's called a limited access facility. What that means is you cannot just walk into this facility. For example, you may have a liquor store down the street or a pharmacy. You can walk into either of those facilities. Nobody says a word to you. That is not the case here. Before you even set foot in this building, you have to hold an ID up that is checked. And if you're not 21 years old, you will not be allowed in the facility. If you are an individual with a child, you may be 21, but the child isn't, you will not be allowed in this facility. Nobody 21 years of age and under 21 is allowed in the facility. You show that ID, you are buzzed in through a door into a vestibule. You cannot go further into that facility until you show the ID a second time to security personnel. The security personnel will check that. Again, assuming you're 21 years of age or older, you will be buzzed into the sales area. And once in there, you will be met by a sales agent who will process your order. You will have to show that ID a third time to the sales agent. The state is insistent on ensuring that this is only open to people 21 years of age or older. I will also tell you that all employees are badged, and even access within the facility is limited. If you are, for example, part of the janitorial crew that works at this facility, you will not have access, for example, to the product vault where it's all stored at night. There's no need for you to have access. This is all done by key cards. So certain parts of the facility will be off limits to most of the employees because there's just no need to have them there. But it's very well regulated in that regard as a limited access facility. Similarly, you've probably heard there are cameras all over this facility. They're on the exterior. We have cameras to give us a 360-degree view all around the facility, so we can see everybody that's coming or going. I will tell you, I mentioned Brookline before. There was a local rash of burglaries that was solved because the cameras, the police accessed the cameras used by the cannabis establishment there, and they figured out who was doing this. So we have that camera access. We can see everything on the exterior. On the interior, every door has a camera on it, every window has a camera on it, and every room where cannabis is handled or stored also has a camera on it. There's also a sophisticated alarm system. You've got a primary alarm notification. If that were somehow to become compromised, whether for power outage or somebody with ill intent tried to do something to access the building and disable that primary alarm notification system, there's a backup system as well that goes to a different alarm monitoring company. So there are also panic alarms and duress alarms all around the facility. The next thing is there's what's called a seed to sale inventory tracking system. Every piece of inventory that comes into this building, the package is barcoded when it gets in and it's weighed. And so there's a weight taken down, and that happens periodically, that you're constantly weighing the inventory every couple of days, every week, a couple of times a month. And if something that, for example, weighed an ounce last week, next week only weighs a half an ounce, the inventory system will actually alert you to that. And then what happens is we go back through the camera video footage, which we keep for 90 days, and we find out who is responsible for taking that marijuana. When we find that out, that person is terminated as an employee. Massachusetts has a no tolerance policy for diversion of product away from the normal sales channels. Additionally, there is a hardened vault that sits on this facility. So all sales product goes into that vault at night where it's stored, and the next morning it'll come out again. The vault is not impenetrable, okay, but it is the type of a room that would take quite some time to break through. So if somebody were at night had ill intent here, they're going to have to come in. There's going to be monitoring that's going to see them on the outside of the building. They're going to have to get through numerous doors, again, all while on camera. Once they do get to the doors to the vault, it's going to take them a long time to get through that vault. And by that time, the local authorities will be there. It's just a very, very difficult place for somebody who has ill intent and is looking to, improperly seize product. Additionally, we do have on-site security personnel during business hours. These are unarmed security guards that are a presence within the facility, and 24/7 off-site monitoring of the facility, again, at all times. And every employee that works here is also background checked. I will tell you, I mention this to people, not everybody believes it, but most of the studies that are coming out these days of what's going on in terms of crime show that crime goes down around these facilities. I don't want to tell you that all of that research is definitive at this point. It's still a young industry, but the good news is that the trend among all of the studies that are being done shows that it does go down. People recognize this is not a good target for any kind of illegal activity. There's just too much security here, too many people watching. And so that's been a real positive in Massachusetts, especially Massachusetts. I would challenge anyone to name a criminal incident in the state over the 6 years that marijuana has been legalized, either medically or adult use. It's just, we're not seeing those types of problems. Next page, please. Yeah, security personnel, again, we do have people, on-site personnel, and you should know that it's very important to us that we police the area surrounding this facility. I know everybody's got a concern. People will leave the facility, they'll take their product, they'll start smoking it outside. I can tell you, with respect to my clients that have opened in Massachusetts, we're not seeing that. And yet, we're very vigilant about it. And that may be why we're not seeing it. We patrol the grounds. We are watching to see We are making sure people are not loitering on our property, and we're watching to see if they're going on neighboring properties. If we see that, we let them know that it's improper. And again, we will alert law enforcement about that. We simply can't have that at a facility because it erodes the trust that we have from our neighbors. Next slide, please. Product and cash security, again, there is cash paid for some of these products, and we do have a vault that the cash goes in, and there is armored car pickup of cash. The really good news is that it used to be a bigger problem than it is now. All you could do was use cash previously, but Massachusetts has been very fortunate. Century Bank and a couple of others actually have been willing to work with these facilities, and just about every one of these marijuana retail stores actually allows you to use a debit card now. So we don't have to keep as much cash on us, and customers don't need to have a lot of cash on them either. Next slide, please. Security and diversion protection, again, 21 years of old and older only here. There's a lot of protocols to make sure that this is only going to the people that are over 21 years of age, all sorts of systems. And I mentioned the customer education in particular already. Next slide, please. Nuisance, same thing. Again, no on-site use here. You won't be able, when you approach this facility, to see any marijuana from the outside. That's a state regulation. This is not intended to be something for gawkers, people sort of coming by, let's see what's going on there. We don't want the facility to become that, and we will not allow people to loiter on the property. Next slide, please. Youth consumption, similarly, the products we sell, important that they all contain these warnings that it's not safe for children, contains THC. We don't sell edible products that look like cartoon characters or resemble fruit, or we don't market to people under 21 years of age. Again, none of that is necessary in order to run a successful business. You can do this the right way. You can sell products intended for adult use. Next slide, please. Public transportation. There is public transportation within a fairly short distance from this facility, and we will use our website to encourage its use. Quite frankly, we see this being a local facility. I would almost call it a neighborhood store. The reality of what's going to happen in Boston is there's going to be about 50 retailers in Boston, and each neighborhood is probably going to have its own store. So you're really not going to need to see people driving in from far away. They'll have other places where they can get this. This will likely mostly serve the neighborhood. Obviously, we hope we're successful and have a unique product selection that does draw other people in. But I just think the reality is this is mostly going to be a local phenomenon who frequents this business. Next one. Parking. There are 11 dedicated spaces for the store. We do have some access during our peak hours, which is really, Thursday evening, Friday evening, in a nearby lot from 12 additional spaces. We don't see that we're going to need that quite a bit. We're going to talk, we actually have some people here who are going to talk about traffic and how many people you can expect to see and how many vehicles. But we turn over our customers very quickly at this facility. The average visit of a customer is 6 to 8 minutes. So, those 11 parking spaces can probably handle in an hour upwards of 60 to 65 to 70 cars even. You turn them over very, very quickly. Most people will use online ordering, so when they show up, they're really just picking up an order. But those that do show up not having ordered previously, they've probably looked at the website and they know what they want. And that's why the visits are so short here. So we are able to move people in, move people out, and utilize the parking we have, which should be sufficient to the task. Next slide. Traffic mitigation, again, I'm going to leave that for the experts who are going to speak to you, I think, in a minute. So, needless to say, there's a couple of things we do want to do on the site. Rather than having this have a Google address of 116 Cambridge Street, meaning people would drive up and sort of stop on Cambridge Street, which is not an ideal place for them to do that. We're going to try to get an address on Roland Street so that they actually drive down Roland Street, they get off Cambridge Street, and we don't have any kind of a traffic pileup there. Similarly, we're going to have a drop-off for Uber, Lyft, taxis, really down Roland Street at the end of the building. You can see it. There's a yellow sort of taxi there. So again, we don't cause any backup out onto Cambridge Street. Next. City mitigation funding. I know from hearing some of the comments when we were before the Boston Cannabis Board from neighbors about various traffic issues. Again, I think what our experts are going to tell you is that we're not really going to add significantly to that. But to the extent that there are concerns in the neighborhood about these types of traffic issues, it's my understanding there's a significant amount of money that is being made available to mitigate some of these problems. $500,000 from what I understand in total. So I know there's going to be some new improvements coming in. They're talked about here that are supposed to address these issues. And again, we'll work with everybody we can from the city to make sure that we're not negatively impacting in that regard. Next slide, please. Operational details. Again, a lot of pre-ordering. I will tell you on the initial opening, sometimes there's a curiosity factor when these places open. That was certainly the case when marijuana was first legalized 2 years ago. It's actually calmed down significantly. You're not seeing crowding at the openings, but in an abundance of caution, on that initial day, we would do a couple things. We will have a police detail, we'll have parking attendants. We will also open, probably for the first couple of weeks, appointment only, just so people get used to coming, seeing how you operate there, where you park, those sorts of things. And that gets them used to the facility and how it works. And we'll start with an abundance of caution in that manner. Next slide, please. And so that's it on my end, but I do believe we have Sean Kelly from Van Ass Associates here, and they've the city of Boston, I think, has given us some assistance in providing for this parking study. And so if I can turn it over to Sean so he can do a presentation on the results of that study, that would be great.
Great. Well, thank you, Phil. Again, everyone, for the record, Sean Kelly with the NASA Associates with the traffic engineers involved with the project. If it's all right with everyone here, I think what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to walk you through our traffic study, how it was conducted, what our findings were, what our recommendations are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Nikki, did you have this loaded up in your deck, or did you need me to screen share this directly?
Sorry, I'm the worst at unmuting on this. I have this here, so.
You do? Okay. Otherwise, I can share as well. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, yeah, if you have it, if you can share it, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me see. That
You can see it.
you can see it. Okay, great. So again, Sean Kelly with Van Ass, and what we did as our work effort is we conducted a transportation impact assessment in accordance with city requirements. The purpose of our study, really is to evaluate the existing traffic and safety characteristics at the transportation infrastructure that serves the project. Look at future traffic demands associated with the project, as well as demands independent of the dispensary. Look at the impact of the project, on the vehicular infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, transit system, and then make recommendations to ensure the project works in a safe and efficient manner. And really the focus is to minimize impacts to the adjacent residential neighborhood. So I think we're all probably at this point familiar with the project site. Again, Cambridge Street, just to orient ourselves, runs an east-west orientation under Interstate 93, Sullivan Square to the east. The site is located essentially in the block that's bordered by Cambridge to the north, Roland Street to the south, Carter to the east, and Stark to the west. The intersection of Stark Street with Cambridge is beneficial in that it has a traffic signal, so that vehicles exiting the project who wanted to get back to Cambridge have the ability to do that at a signalized location. The parking will be accessed via Carter Street, which is an unsignalized intersection, allows you to access, then use Roland Street to egress out to Stark Street. The study area that we looked at, which was determined in consultation with city, with the BDPA, and also the BTD, includes the three intersections that are expected to accommodate the majority of the project-related traffic, and that would be the kind of the front door of the Stark Street, Parker Street intersection. Parker Street is one-way southbound. Stark Street is a two-way corridor. The unsignalized intersection with Carter Street, and then the signalized intersection of the 93 off-ramp that joins with Cambridge Street further east. And the things that we looked at, as part of our initial data collection, existing condition assessment were, traffic volumes that are out there, the pedestrian and bicycle volumes. We took a look at motor vehicle crash data to see what the safety history was in the area. We inventory the bicycle and pedestrian accommodations to ensure, we have adequate infrastructure to support the increases associated with the project. And then we also look at public transportation. So just as a summary, today under existing conditions, we did some counts to take a look at what the volumes are. We do recognize that, under today's conditions, volumes are definitely lower than they would be typically because of COVID-19. So we were able to get some data that was recently collected by BTD and use that data to adjust our volumes accordingly so they reflect typical conditions. But under normal conditions, Cambridge Street carries about 1,250 cars an hour. In the morning peak hour, that's two-way flow, eastbound and westbound. Weekday evening and Saturday midday, it's a little higher in the range of about 1,350. And these are really the time periods that we drill down on as part of our analysis. The morning and evening peak, as you can imagine, are the heaviest commuter hours. And then Saturday is often, a heavy commercial peak when people are doing their shopping. We looked at pedestrian and bike volumes that are out there. Today, during peak hours, you get anywhere from about 50 to 70 pedestrians an hour crossing one of the four crosswalks at the intersection of Cambridge and Parker Street. And included that are 10 to 30 an hour that actually cross Cambridge Street itself. In terms of bicycle activity, it's about 10 to 20 bicyclists per hour traveling predominantly eastbound and westbound on Cambridge. We looked at motor vehicle crash data, consistent with state requirements. We went out and looked at the last 5 years of crash data for each of the intersections in our study area. What we do is look at the manner of collision, contributing factors. Did they result in property damage? Did they result in personal injury? And really, what we determine is what we call the motor vehicle crash rate, which lets us determine whether or not these locations are above average or below average with respect to the number of crashes you would expect based on state averages and the level of volume that they accommodate. And what we found was that all the intersections that we studied exhibited crash rates that were below the state average. Most of the crashes that occurred out here resulted in property damage only. They were fender bender type crashes. We looked at the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. This area is well served in terms of the accommodations for pedestrians and bicyclists. There's this sidewalk provided continuously along both sides of Cambridge Street with signalized pedestrian crossings at Parker and Stark. There are also exclusive bike lanes, both eastbound and westbound on Cambridge Street. So the infrastructure in the vicinity of the site is certainly there to accommodate customer activity. And then we looked at public transportation, and as pointed out, there are a number of bus routes that run immediately by the front of the site. There's also the orange line at Sullivan Square, which is in close walking distance, 5 minutes to the east. This here just, again, highlighting the public transportation services. Again, the site is located just above Roland across from Parker. The 86 and 91 bus route that travel right by the site with bus stops located immediately adjacent to the site on Cambridge Street. And then again, within walking distance is Sullivan Square Station, the orange line. where you can pick up another, I believe it's 10 additional bus routes that serve that area. So again, the site certainly is well served. We did a parking inventory where we went out and looked at the parking that's available in the area and also the demand characteristics. And, really we're confident that the parking that's provided within the immediate site itself, locations 1 and 2, will be adequate to accommodate the demands of the project, particularly with the 12 additional spaces that may be available as needed in Lot 1. But we also took a look at some of the on-street parking that's available along Cambridge Street. As you get close to the I-93 overpass, there's 2-hour parking in this area here, and there's quite a bit of it on both sides of the street. As you move close to the site, you have unrestricted parking along the frontage, right in front of the front building and the tavern to the right. There's unrestricted parking immediately west of the site along Cambridge in this area, and there's also some unrestricted parking on the opposite side. In total, there are basically 89 spaces that are in close proximity, and we made a point of ensuring that we didn't account for any spaces, in the residential neighborhood, even if these are residents of Charlestown that come to do business here. Ultimately, we're only looking at the parking along Cambridge and then in the site. And what we found was that typically the available spaces during the peak hours, that morning, that evening, that Saturday, range anywhere from about 60 to 65 spaces, which is well in excess of what we anticipate as the peak demands for the project. So we're confident that the parking is adequate and it can accommodate the project, and there won't be any spillover into the adjacent residential neighborhoods. With respect to the project itself, we ran what we call trip generation analyses, where we look at the number of trips we can expect. And there's a couple components to this. We utilize what's known as the Institute of Transportation Engineers data, which is data that's been compiled at existing dispensaries. Lets us know how many trips you can expect, total trips. And, typically in the morning, it's not very busy. They're showing about 30. The weekday evening, it's a little heavier, and you're in the 66 range. And then Saturday midday is really the busiest time, 109. Now, these are the ITE vehicle trips. The way it works in the city of Boston is we convert those into person trips. So we recognize that typically a vehicle would have more than one person in it. You apply that factor and you get your person trips. And then we look at the different mode splits that you have, and there's data provided for the city of Charleston, the neighborhood of Charleston, for the city of Boston, that shows that about half of the trips will be auto-based, and about half of the trips occur either via transit, bicycle trips, or pedestrian trips. So we sort those and break those out. And then we reapply the vehicle occupancy rate to take the automobile person trips back to vehicle trips. And what we end up with is, you're looking at about 16 trips in the morning. So it's, we're not very busy in the morning. It's about a trip every 4 minutes. In the weekday evening, you're looking at about 34 trips, about 17 in, 17 out. And then really the busiest time is the Saturday midday, which doesn't coincide with those commuter peaks, where you're looking at, about a customer arriving every other minute and a customer leaving every other minute. So, that's really the essence in terms of the impact to vehicle traffic, is one additional car coming every minute to 4 minutes during the busiest hours. The impacts to bicycle and transit trips in terms of the increases, can easily be absorbed within the existing pedestrian and bicycle capacity along the roadways, and certainly within the transit, given the number of uses that serve the site. We were asked by the city to do a comparison, just to take a look at how much traffic dispensary generates comparative to other commercial uses that could potentially occupy the site. And the two that we looked at were a coffee shop. This would be a walk-in coffee shop, say a Starbucks branch, for instance, that did not provide a drive-through window. And then a restaurant with takeout. This could be, a Subway or any type of use like that. We ran the generation, and what it shows is that, in the morning peak hour, as you can see, we're a very low number, 31 trips. And these are total trips, walking trips, transit, bicycle, vehicle. A coffee shop would do substantially more. A restaurant would do almost double, a little more than double, rather. Weekday evening, again, the dispensary in comparison to a coffee shop or a restaurant would again do less trips. And then on the Saturday, again, the same story. The dispensary does about 109 total. The coffee shop and restaurant would do more during both peaks. So I think that the goal here was to look at how would this compare to other uses, and certainly there are more intensive commercial uses that could occupy this site than the dispensary use. So in conclusion, as I walk through, this project's expected to generate about, an additional vehicle trip every 1 to 4 minutes, depending on the hour of the day, less in the morning, a little bit more in the weekday evening, and then really the most generation, again, is that Saturday midday. We've looked at the impacts to delays, and quite frankly, they're very minor. As you can imagine, we're talking about a corridor that has, 1,200 to 1,300 cars an hour traveling it, adding a car every 1 to 4 minutes resulted in very little change in the delays that exist today. In the order of you may wait another second at a traffic light, but it wasn't something that's very notable. The safety deficiencies, again, we looked at all the intersections crash rates. They were all below the state average, and the majority of them were fender bender type collisions that didn't result in personal injuries. We're not projecting any impact in terms of the infrastructure that serves pedestrians and bicyclists and even vehicle traffic. There's certainly adequate capacity to accommodate additional pedestrian activity on the sidewalks and crosswalks and signalized crossings, and the bike lane infrastructure is there. And again, the parking is more than adequate to accommodate the peak needs without relying on any of the parking in the adjacent neighborhood. The recommendations, and I know that we walked through some of these previously, but just to touch on them again, one is to start with an initial opening plan. Again, I think I would agree that the curiosity factor probably has worn off a little bit as these shops become more and more prevalent. But during the opening period, we typically do request that there's appointment only. You have increased staffing to direct traffic in the parking lots. A police detail, it was mentioned as well. Just means to ensure that when you do have that initial opening rush, to the extent that it's there, you can manage it and mitigate it. And I think that certainly the having to call ahead and schedule an appointment will do that, because it'll ultimately serve to disperse the traffic evenly, and you won't have any real spikes in terms of arrivals. The parking management, again, that was walked through. There were 11 spaces. The 2 to the rear would be for, pickup, drop off, and curbside delivery. The 2 closest to Cambridge Street would be for the delivery service that they offer with customer parking, rather with employee parking. And then the balance of the space would be used for the customers that arrive to do shopping within the store. And again, there are 12 additional spaces next door if needed. One of the main mitigation measures that's been recommended and will be implemented is a transportation demand management plan. And basically, this is a series of measures that will be implemented to minimize the impacts of not just customer traffic, but also employee traffic and employee parking. There'll be a transportation coordinator assigned at the store that will act as the liaison with the BTD. All employees that are hired will get information given to them in their orientation welcome packet, letting them know about the various modes of transport, whether it be the blue bike stations that are in close proximity, the bus service, the Orange Line service, to alert them of other means to get to work. Employees will not be allowed to park on site, so essentially they won't have a parking space. And that'll be another means to promote them to use transit, biking, walking trips, things of that nature. All employees that work at the facility will be offered a MBTA pass and a Blue Bikes membership. So, they won't even have to pay for the use of an alternative mode of transportation to work. They'll, if they choose to take the train, it'll be paid for. If they choose to use a Blue Bike and bike to work, that's covered as well. So that's a definite plus. There'll be bicycle racks provided on site. We anticipate approximately 10 spaces, right in front of the store that can be used by customers or employees. And there's also potential to have indoor secured parking at the other building on site for employees if that is needed. And lastly, I think we did mention the pre-registration in the opening time, just to reduce those early trips. And then with respect to, in terms of traffic mitigation, the one thing that we are recommending, and I'm going to go back a few slides, because I think it'll be easier to understand it. So under existing conditions, there's really no restriction in terms of vehicles coming up Stark Street. So when you get a red light at Stark, you can make that right on red and make that maneuver eastbound towards 93. one of the things the project will generate, we certainly hope it's the case, is pedestrian trips. People from the neighborhood, again, coming down to make purchases. And so what's going to happen is you're ultimately going to have more pedestrian crossings of Cambridge Street, at this location. If it's deemed appropriate by the BTD, what we're recommending is that a no right on red sign be installed on Stark Street northbound. We don't want to have a situation where, someone who's unfamiliar with the area, doesn't understand that there's an exclusive pedestrian phase here that gets called, pulls up, has the red light, looks to the left and sees that they have a gap because the cars aren't moving and thinks, well, I can go, and they make that right on red during the pedestrian phase. So, what we'd like to do is have a no right on red condition, that way that movement from Stark Street is only occurring during the green phase, and it minimizes the potential for conflicts between that turning traffic and pedestrians or bicyclists crossing Cambridge Street at this location. And I believe that is all I have for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Awesome, Sean. I'm just going to jump back in here. So thank you for the presentation, Phil and Nikki, and Sean for the update on the traffic study. So we are now going to move to comments and questions. I know there's a few already in the chat. So I want to make sure we're moving to those first. I do just want to, for folks who have joined WebEx or haven't joined WebEx before, I just want to make sure we're aware of how to participate. If you're joining us via the computer, you can indicate in the chat that you'd like a question to be answered, or you can raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. If you are dialing in by phone, you can press *3, and that will indicate your hand is raised, and we can unmute you from there. I'm going to go first to David and then to Brian. David, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, perfect. All right. Thank you for the presentation. This is David Luce here. I'm over on Clinton Place. And I'm sure our entire community is wondering this, but really for Sean with the traffic study, the main issue we have always had is that our neighborhood is a cut through to avoid the rotary. So all of the vehicular traffic in terms of the studies and everything and parking on the main street is fantastic, but we run into this issue every day where I understand there's a 2016 traffic study that found that Parker Street carries about 1,200 vehicles down it every day. This is a residential neighborhood. You're talking at least a car a minute. And I think that has always been our main concern. And I would ask you and then BTD, what can we do to mitigate traffic coming through our neighborhood? We're less concerned about traffic on Cambridge Street. It's really about people cutting through to avoid the rotary, which has been a problem for a long time. And by the way, that study that I'm referencing, I understand that was done before the Encore Casino went in, before North Point was really expanded. So it's probably worse than that now. So I just wanted to see if you could address that.
Well, I think certainly, there will be some traffic that comes down Parker Street. I mean, there's no denying it. If you live in the neighborhood, and as pointed out, this is ultimately, really going to be a neighborhood store, then you likely will see some traffic. We can talk to Bill Conroy at BT and see if they would be, in favor of doing some traffic calming measures. But I think ultimately, you're correct. There will be some impact at Parker, but it will likely be traffic from the neighborhood. I don't think you're going to get people that are traveling, from miles away to come here. It'll be people from your neighborhood that use that because it's a convenient access route that gives you direct access to the site.
Well, I guess just to follow up, Sean, I think that the issue that we have now is that we have lots of out-of-state people who cut through our neighborhood all the time. So theoretically, they could be, stopping on their way home or, to work potentially. There's often, like, I know the Somerville cops were just nearby ticketing out-of-state folks who were driving through. And I recognize that the assumption here is that it'll mostly be folks from within the area going. However, we have to acknowledge that the Encore Casino is close, and this would be the closest place. And so there's very likely to be additional vehicular traffic coming from there. And I guess that's our community's main concern, really. I think we need mitigation measures. We've been asking for it for a long time. I know that's not that's not Nikki's company's problem, but I think this is our concern with anything that goes into our area.
I just understand the concern. No, and I'm looking at the volumes now. I mean, as it relates to cut through, the traffic coming off of Parker today, the peak hour volumes, total volume is, and this is based on counts that we did, it's about 55 to 60 cars in the morning and or rather the evening, about 70 on the Saturday, and then about 120. So it looks like it's probably, to the extent it's happening, it'd be more so in the morning peak, I suspect.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact time of day. I actually don't live on Parker Street. I know there's a bunch of folks on this call who can speak to it more. I just know that, when that study was done in 2016 pre-COVID, and it's like it is a big problem. We have lots of cars, trucks, all sorts of stuff going on in Parker. It's the only way out once you get in, really. And that's where everyone uses. But yeah, I mean, maybe someone who, actually lives in the street day to day and deals with this could also weigh in. I know Brian does. I think he was up next. So.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I'm going to go to Brian, Sean, and then Elaine. I know there's a lot of folks who've raised your hand. I'm taking stock of it, and I'll just keep going who's next in the order. So I'm going to go to Brian, and then Sean, and then Elaine. So Brian, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's information this evening. My questions are mostly for Mr. Kelly, Sean. And obviously, the city has problems with traffic, and so people complain about traffic. But we have about 1/3 of all of the commuter traffic that goes into Boston comes through the Sullivan Square area. Parker Street has, as of 5 years ago, before Union Square exploded, before North Point exploded, before the casino was created, before Assembly blew up, before the Mass General Hospital moved there, we had 1,200 vehicles come down our street daily. We're not looking at hourly traffic. We're talking about 800 vehicles beginning in the early morning hours, okay? This corner of Parker Street and Cambridge Street, you talk about hourly traffic, okay? Which I think is a little disingenuous, because if you live here, there are about 14,000 vehicles that go down Cambridge Street daily. It's a one-way road, okay? At the intersection of Parker Street and Cambridge Street, we have an enormous Dunkin' Donuts that doesn't even have a sidewalk. On the right-hand side, we have a gas station that doesn't have a sidewalk. As someone that deals with safety issues, people walking down Cambridge Street don't even have curbs. Vehicles just simply roll up into these parking lots directly across the street from where you anticipate having this marijuana dispensary, okay? So you have to acknowledge the folks here have been dealing with this issue for a very long time, and we have had no help from the city whatsoever. So it's not personal, Nikki. It's a serious problem on our streets, okay? This has nothing to do with you as an individual, okay? Now, we had a meeting in June of 2019 with the city, with BTD, and they agreed that we had a tremendous cut-through problem of traffic in the morning on Parker Street, which reverses and goes back up Brighton Street. All of these folks are trying to avoid the Rotary at Sullivan Square, okay? We're tagged, we're it. This is directly where you want to put your new commercial venture. And Bill Conroy agreed. He walked the street. He saw how difficult it was for the pedestrians and for the folks who live here. But nothing's happened since then. And we've been asking for follow-up meetings and help, okay? None of the numbers you use now have anything to do with what really goes on in our street during normal traffic time period. COVID has changed everything. So when you quote 55 vehicles, you're talking about this morning per hour, right? You're not talking about the day. But we know what the real numbers are like because we had real studies done, okay? And we live right here. And we're not going anywhere, okay? We're not going anywhere. We're going to fight this until the city does something to protect the residents of our area. Streets should be safe for the people who live and work here, not for people who commute from the suburban community to go to North Point every day, okay? So this is directed not at you, Nikki. This is directed at the city. Let me say something else, okay? You talk about everything's hourly, right? How many vehicle trips Mr. Kelly, are going to happen to your new dispensary per week? In addition to the Dunkin' Donuts, the commuter cut through traffic, is it 5,000 vehicle trips a week? Be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we could figure that out for you. When we do these analyses,
You really should have
focus
figured it
on-
out because you give us the hourly numbers, do the math. How many vehicle trips per week are going to happen on the weekend?
Again, it's not as simple as taking the hourly rate and multiplying it by 12 and multiplying it by 7. You know, there's a temporal distribution. When we do these studies, and this is the state and city guidelines, we focus on the busiest hours of roadway traffic. So we look at the morning, we look at the evening, and then we look at that busiest. You know, I certainly recognize what you're saying, that there are many other hours during the day, and I certainly am you know, sensitive to the notion that, you know, I have no doubt there is, you know, cut through traffic, commuter traffic that exists today that has nothing to do with this project, but that does have an impact on your neighborhood, you know, and traffic on Parker Street. But you know, I can get you a weekly number, but it's not something I'm just going to, you know, throw off the top of my head, because it's not as simple as taking the hourly volume and multiplying it by 12 by 7. It's you know, every hour of the day is different. You have to run through all those numbers.
And thank you, Sean. I'm just going to quickly jump. Bill Conroy from BTD is here with us tonight. So I'm going to unmute him to address some of those BTD specific concerns. So Bill, you're unmuted.
Okay, all right. Thank you, and thank you, folks. It's been a while since we've been out there to the community, myself and Quinlan Locke, when we had the meeting over at Cambridge College. And I've fought like hell, I have to say, to get a project underway as soon as possible for the Lost Village. That being said, you've seen some additional lighting go in over there from Public Works, but that's still not enough. I was able to secure over $295,000 from the casino for a construction grant. And I also applied for an additional grant for that construction grant for this year. The total cost of the project is somewhere around $600,000. I've talked to Chief Osgood about this. I've told him numerous times, this is a high priority. We need to do something over there in the Lost Village. He's agreed, budget's agreed. So we've agreed that this project's going to be built and underway by the fall of this year. So that's what they're committed to. I have the plans. We don't have 100% plans, but I'll go over the six locations as we discussed before, but we can have a separate meeting on this too. You know, if Pat wants to organize a meeting, we can do that with the group. But we talked about Brighton Street and Cambridge Street. We talked about tightening up the radii on that. We have that intersection. We have the intersection at Hadley Street and Parker, tightening that all up as well. As we go on, we talked about Parker Street in Caldwell and realigning those handicap ramps. I think Public Works actually went out there, put a new ramp in the exact location, which is, I can't comment on that. But as far as Perkins Street, I think when we made that walk around, we saw that our close neighbor there in Somerville had "do not enter" one way. Our goal is to take that sign down and make Perkins Street two-way. So that will help alleviate some of the traffic concerns in that area. The other thing is we talked about Caldwell going one way towards Marfa, and then we had that slingshot coming down from Marfa Way. And our goal is, and I think the community liked this idea, tighten up that whole corner, expand the dog park that's currently there, pick up additional green space or maybe more for the dogs. So this project is real. I just discussed it with the designers as well. So, I mean, and then we talked about adding some interconnect cable and other stuff and for the other streets of the other major intersections. So that being said, I mean, this is real. So, and I apologize, we haven't been out there. And this proponent here, we've helped them along, but I understand the angst of the community. So if we want to have an additional meeting, what I just discussed, I'm happy to do that. Happy to share the plans with the community. I think it would be helpful. Maybe we do you know, we talked about street directions at one point in time. I know we did that as well. But if you guys get a visual on the plans, I think that will be helpful. Okay? Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Bill. I'm going to get going again with the questions. I do just want to note that we're joined tonight by Leslie Hawkins from the Boston Cannabis Board. So if there are questions specific to like process or anything to do with the official Cannabis Board, feel free to ask those as well. But I know traffic's a hot topic. I'm going to go to Sean. You're unmuted.
Excellent. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Just real quick, public comments are okay at this point, or?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent. So I just want to direct this to Nikki. I think the business plan was well done. I think you'd be a very much a positive addition to the Charlestown neighborhood and just businesses. I think it seems like I get a sense that you would be very community involved and et cetera. And I think that's always a good thing for our business leaders. But this is, I think, my second time coming to a cannabis proposal, business proposal for this particular part of Charlestown. And I think the big problem is going to be that there's a large constituency in Charlestown that's just going to be viscerally against this type of business because of the history that we've had in Charlestown with the opioid crisis, where it was basically an atomic bomb went loose during the 90s and obviously during the 2000s. So again, I think there's going to be a large negative prospect, not towards you, Nikki, but just towards what this business is. And it's just, I think visceral because, families were ripped in half. And again, today we still see, the walking dead going throughout our neighborhoods, the victims of the opioid crisis. And again, we know that the marijuana is not opioids, but again, it's going to be that visceral negative thought process in marijuana businesses in general. So that's just my comment. Trying to be at least consistent. Said the same thing with the last marijuana business that was proposed for the Lost Village. And again, I hope you all the best, Nikki. And again, I think you're great plans and well done. But again, just there's a visceral thing with our history in this town. So again, best of luck. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to go to Elaine. You're unmuted.
How are you? Elaine Donovan. I'm a lifelong Charlestown resident. Nikki, from what I can see, nothing seems to have changed since the last time that we saw your proposal. It seems to still be the exact same size, correct?
It is.
Yeah, too big, way too big. The traffic is another major issue. I know everybody thinks they're going to do terrific things and God's going to come down and make everything perfect with the traffic here. We are locked in. We can't get out on a good day. If you build some sort of a business of that size, it's only going to be 10 times worse. I don't care who you're saying, what time they're coming, this, that, and the other thing. Deliveries are only going to make it worse. It's all just way too much and too big for us. Do you have a partner, or is Maggie Supri still with you, or she's not?
Not. So it is just me, and
Oh, so
yep,
you're-
I'm the only one right now.
And you are a Boston resident? Because from what I understand, you live in Quincy, no?
No, I don't live in Quincy. Sorry, I live in Dorchester.
Oh, you do? Okay. And you continually say you're going to give back, and you want to give to where you're from. And again, we don't know you. So it's very difficult, for something like this to start in a community like this. Like Sean just said, we've been through hell and back with an opioid issue here. I mean, it's been horrendous. So to not know you and to not know what you're bringing with you, it's all just, it's confusing. It's concerning, to say the least. And like I said, this proposal hasn't changed since the last time when we had concerns and questions before. Nothing seems to be different except that you don't have a partner anymore.
Yeah, if I can speak to that a little bit, I think quite a bit has changed, actually. Again, I think we're trying to talk to the community. We understand, we got this traffic study, which, if I'm understanding it, is basically sort of acknowledging, while we acknowledge what everybody seems to be saying here, that there are some traffic issues in the area, the point is this particular business is not going to significantly add to that. And I think that's a major point that maybe you're downplaying a little bit, but we're sensitive to that. So again, I'm not quite sure I understand the size of the business and how that impacts anything. It's the number of people that are going to go here, which is not going to be a significant addition to what you already have. So I'm appreciative of it. You're all sort of saying a lot of the same things, and we certainly hear them. We'd like to be a part of the solution if possible. So appreciate those comments.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm going to go to Paige next. I know there's quite a few hands raised, so I will get to you. I just want to make sure that we're going in order of folks who raise their hands. Paige, you are unmuted.
Hi, Paige Grigling at 37 Parker Street. And yeah, I'm going to repeat the same thing that my neighbors repeated because they bear repeating, and it's the traffic. And while I appreciate the traffic study that was done for Cambridge Street and Roland Street, it doesn't focus on Parker, and I live right on the corner. Yes, the traffic is atrocious coming down that street, especially in the morning. It's dangerous when my car is parked on the street. I go out and open my car door, and I'm afraid of the car door being hit, myself being hit, my children. So yeah, I have to echo that the traffic is really an issue, and I wish that the study would have focused more on Parker Street, more on Brighton Street, more on Hadley Street. And I want to ask, perhaps this is a question for Patrick or the woman of the Cannabis Board. How is the city going to decide between this business and the business that is on the deciding block in Sullivan Square at the old West Place restaurant? So is that still a possibility, and how is that going to be decided? So both of them can't happen. So how's that going to work?
So Pat, if you don't mind, do you want me to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Pat. So my name is Leslie Delaney Hawkins. I'm the executive secretary. I'm the attorney for the Cannabis Board. I don't usually attend these meetings, but I do want to make myself available and our staff available for questions about the process, because I know there are a lot of questions out there. In terms of, I just want to be very clear, in terms of where this applicant is in the process, they were denied without prejudice, and the board encouraged them on the record to return to the community, which they're obviously doing. That's why we're here. And one of the questions that was before the board was the status of the concerns over traffic. And they've conducted this traffic study that is before everyone. Everyone will give whatever weight they deem appropriate to their traffic study, but they have done their due diligence in conducting that traffic study. In terms of the process in other establishments, this board evaluates every applicant on its own merits. So in this instance, at this time, this applicant does not have a buffer zone issue. And I think that's what the individual asking the question was alluding to, is that there is a half-mile buffer zone variance requirement between cannabis establishments. When evaluating any establishment, this board does not look to prior applicants. It does not look to future applicants. It looks to the applicant and the site before it. This board is tasked with evaluating the appropriateness in time, place, and manner. And that is what the board does. So in terms of any future applicant, the board will be looking at it in terms of whether there is an existing applicant within a half-mile buffer. And if that is the issue, if that is the situation where there has been a license granted within a half-mile, the board will apply its elevated standards pursuant to our rules and regulations, which mirror the variance standards, which is what you would need from the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to obtain a buffer zone variance. So there is always the possibility that there are two locations sited within a half-mile of each other. The city has a legal obligation to cite 52 of these recreational dispensaries at a minimum, but we're doing so in a very thoughtful and equitable way. So I just want to emphasize that everything is evaluated on its own merits in terms of time, place, and manner. There has never been a question about the Heritage Club's equity status or the character of the applicant. So I just wanted to make that clear. Again, as Pat Fandel mentioned, I'm here to answer any procedural questions, but I did want to make that very clear because this is not an instance of comparing one applicant to another applicant. We don't do that in any location in the city. We look at everything on its own merits.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. And there's a couple questions in the chat. Could you just explain briefly the open comment period? We have, correct me if I'm wrong, there's this initial meeting and then there's the time from now until the board hearing, and then there's an open hearing, open comment period until the board takes an official vote, correct?
Yep, absolutely. So in order to have a completed application before the board, you have to have a complete application by the last business day of the month. And I know this sounds kind of onerous and specific, but it's really important to provide transparency and accountability in this process. So if you have a complete application before the board, what that means is you have provided us everything that we need. You have requested your letter of support, opposition, or non-opposition from your district city councilor, and you've either received that or the 45-day period after that request has run. If that is received by the last business day of the month and you're an equity applicant, because obviously a huge charge of this board is ensuring equity both in the applicants and the distribution of these licenses, you'll be placed on the next agenda. So if you're an equity applicant, you get on as quickly as we can get you on. If you're non-equity, you get placed in the queue and you'll be paired based on the date of your application on a one-to-one basis with an equity applicant. So I can't predict when someone will be on the agenda, but I can say that after this community meeting, this is what triggers the request to the district city councilor and allows them a 45-day period to provide a letter of support, opposition, or non-opposition. If they don't provide anything, non-opposition is assumed and they are permitted to supplement that at a hearing before the board. But this board feels it's very important to be, again, transparent and accountable in this process. So we are trying to make it very clear what the timeline is. Once someone is scheduled for a hearing, they appear before the board on the second Wednesday of the month. That's a public hearing. Testimony is accepted. The record is kept open until the following Tuesday at 5 p.m. The board votes on Wednesday, and no public testimony is taken at that time. But I do think it's important to note, especially with everyone who's taking the time out of their day to come to this meeting, to come to our public hearings, there is no additional weight given to spoken testimony than there is to written testimony. So if you're not available to come to a hearing, if you're not available to come to a meeting, if you send an email, if you send a letter, if you leave a voicemail, that is still given exactly the same weight as it would be if you appeared before the board.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. I am going to go to Peter, then Anne Marie and Tanya, and I just put an updated speaking order in the chat. So Peter, you're unmuted. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I had a couple of questions that I raised earlier. So when the presentation was going on, one of the things that we talked about was community. What community are we talking about here? Are we talking about the community that is in like close proximity to the business, to the proposed business? Or are we talking about the community at large in Boston? Second question, what changed since the last time Heritage Club proposed that? It was probably about 6 months ago, and I don't see any additional changes. I also want to make a comment specifically about the traffic. The way it is proposed right now, it's going to be a nightmare. I'll tell you why. If you're coming from Cambridge Street and you're trying to make a left turn onto Stark Street right before the traffic lights, it's not going to be possible. I live in 32 Parker Street, which is facing Cambridge Street, and I can see the traffic every day, and I know exactly what I'm talking about here. So this is one of my comments that it's going to be crazy if you allow traffic to make a left turn right before the traffic light. The amount of traffic right now since October of last year is increased probably threefold. And the reason is the GLX extension. And second is that there's going to be a 250 unit condominium building built right by Cambridge Street and the Belt Road, which is right next actually to the Holiday Inn. So imagine the amount of traffic that this will generate going forward. Just giving you a heads up. So the first two questions again, what are you talking about when you're talking about community? What are you giving back to the community? And what changed since the last time you proposed that?
Sure. Let me try to address that. The community, obviously it's the neighbors. It's also the broader community. It's both. So in terms of what we're trying to provide for the community, I think, I outlined some pretty aggressive programs that we're talking about, providing, a percentage of our net profits, 3% of net profits to a board that can address neighborhood concerns for the Lost Village. I think that's significant. Similarly, the homeowner closing cost program that we're proposing, I think that's significant. In terms of what's changed, I can tell you, the issues that are raised of concern at the prior meeting, and quite frankly, at the Boston Cannabis Board meeting, surrounded two issues, traffic and ownership. What's changed is we got a traffic study that basically says we're not really adding to the problem in any significant manner. I think that's important. I understand everybody explaining to me the traffic issues here. I think the key point is you've clearly got issues that you are raising with the city of Boston, and that's great. But we're not adding to that problem, not in any significant way, as it's been explained to us by that traffic study. In terms of the ownership, it's simplified significantly. Nikki is the owner, period. There's nobody else. So, in terms of what's changed, we've addressed the two biggest issues that raise concerns, I think, quite well. Other than that, we've added some additional information about how we operate. I went over significant issues regarding how security is handled, operations are handled. I think those are all new items. It's still the same building, we'll acknowledge that, but it's, we've provided a lot of updates to how this is going to operate.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Anne Marie next. Brian, you're unmuted for Anne Marie.
Thank you, Patrick. I would have to agree with everyone else who's spoken here, and I will have to disagree with Mr. Silverman that I don't think anything has changed. And to suggest that throwing money at the community with a pot of here's some 3% of our proceeds, that does not make our quality of life better here. Money is not going to make our neighborhood safer. And in fact, really, I think it's a little disingenuous for the traffic folks to come here and say that it's not going to exacerbate the issue that we have already. We know we have a traffic issue. We know we have a public safety issue. We know we have a serious situation here. And I really take offense at the fact that Mr. Kelly suggests that there's only been fender benders. There have been children hit by cars. There was a child who was killed at the bottom of the street. So you really should probably do your homework a little bit better. There was someone who was killed on a bicycle at Sullivan Square not too long ago. So I think you really are looking at it with rose-colored glasses that truly benefit your client. And I understand that. But we have to defend ourselves here as well. And Mr. Conroy has had a meeting with us. And if I really, I take exception to that as well, because now we're a priority. Now everything's going to get fixed. We got lights. We got street lights. Street lights. Can you explain to me how street lights fix our traffic? We didn't just fall off the turnip truck. We live here. We know the severity of the traffic. And when you say we're willing to talk with the community, the last thing that Chairman Joyce left you with when she said she wanted you to go back to the community was to talk with the community. We have not heard not one word from anybody on this call until right now. So my question is for Nikki, number one, I don't think things have changed. And my question is this, are you planning to go forward with your application by the end of this month?
So first of all, I actually wrote letters to all of my abutters, and I know Mary Boucher at the Charlestown Neighborhood Council said she did receive that. So I don't know if other people who just didn't attend or haven't gotten to speak yet can speak up on that. And I have been speaking to a few of the community members. I have reached out to multiple abutters and asked if they'd like to be a part of the committee. The community fund, I know Peter was concerned about what community I'm talking about. I separate everything out very specifically so you know who I'm directing it to. The Lost Village Community Trust is for the Lost Village community. It's not for all of Charlestown because you guys are the community that I'm going to be a part of. No other applicant is giving 3% to the community. They have to give a 3% fee to Boston, and that set of funds can be used in Southie, it could be used in Alston, it could be used in Back Bay. They could skip you guys altogether, and I don't think that's acceptable. So I made an effort to separate that out specifically for the community that I'm joining, in addition to the other efforts that I want to make in terms of housing because I work in real estate, in addition to the other things I want to do in terms of jobs and diversity to help everybody in the cannabis community. So on all levels, I'm trying to make sure I'm helping people. I hope that's sufficient for you guys. It seems like it might not be. There's nobody else doing this. That's why I haven't changed my proposal, because if I put mine next to other people's, I feel like they could do more. A lot of times they're doing can drives. I'm not going to come back and do pretend service that I don't think is going to change people's lives. Home ownership is a key step to building wealth. And no, I can't throw money at people, but giving people opportunities and a foot in the door in a place where they get turned away a lot, they can pay rent, their landlord's rent, but they can't pay their own mortgage. I don't think that's fair. So that's why I chose to pick those as my initiatives. Every business is different, and hopefully some community members appreciate that. As far as the study, I asked that BTD design the study because I'm not a traffic expert. So if there are issues with the study, that should be directed at the city. And yeah, I appreciate you guys attending and I appreciate the feedback.
I just need to jump in. Leslie has a quick comment on that, so I'm just going to defer to her and then read it back up.
Thank you, Pat. I just want to make clear that when any license is granted, there is a 3% taking that comes, that up to a 3% taking that can come to the city aside from the tax, but that is legally required to go to the area impacted by the cannabis establishment. Legally, that cannot go to another neighborhood. So I just want to make that clarification that if a license is granted in this or any neighborhood, that 3% is directed back to that neighborhood.
Thank you, Leslie. I am going to go to Tanya. Sorry, I'm just looking for your name. Tanya, you're unmuted.
Thanks, Patrick. I just had a question regarding the applications and whether or not they're open to the public for review.
Pat, again, I'm gonna guess that you're gonna defer to me on this.
Absolutely.
Tanya, as you are very well aware, everything is public record. And any public records request will be responded to within the statutory period.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. So we're not able to view the applications, the public is not able to view the applications of the applicants unless they actually issue a FOIA for it?
No, all presentations are posted on the Boston Cannabis Board's website once they're finalized. But in terms of the applications, there's a lot of very personal information that we have to redact before we provide the copies of the applications. But in terms of the substantive operational proposals, that's all available to the public as soon as it's received by the board and posted for a hearing.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tanya. Chris, You are up. Chris, you're unmuted.
Awesome, thank you. So just had a couple questions really about the traffic study. So I know you've said multiple times the things that have changed with the traffic study and the question on ownership. I don't really care about the ownership piece, but I do think the question around that, if I'm not mistaken, last time was what was going to happen post getting the license, some outside investment kind of after the fact. So I don't know if that's actually still been addressed, but going to the traffic study, I think, I mean, we saw some high level numbers that Sean put up, but they don't match with the projections the business is giving. Phil's given numbers of turning 70 cars an hour in those parking spaces they have. The traffic study said 55 cars an hour at a peak time. We're giving 150 to homeowners, 3% to the city, above market wage benefits, all this stuff. And the business has to be projected significant volume, which appeared to not make it into the traffic study. So I guess my question is around the traffic study, kind of where did you get your projections based on what the business will be doing? And does the traffic study take into account the congestion of those cars coming off the 93 ramp that are going right? Because I think a big part of the issue you get is to back up on Cambridge Street because everyone's running the light off the ramp to get there, and then you can't even turn on a Parker Street half the time because people run the light in front of the glass shop now. The off ramp's a disaster, so you just can't go anywhere. So you probably would see more cars if you could actually get down Cambridge Street. I think the traffic study also missed the Parker Street and then everything that's happening on the backside too, which was pointed out earlier. So was that considered at all? I haven't actually seen anything other than the brief numbers that you showed. And then the 89 parking spaces that you pointed out, those are mostly taken. I mean, even during COVID, you drive down the street any time of the week, I would say more than 75% filled. So I know that was a lot. I can repeat the questions if it's helpful, but it's really just,
yeah. I
study take into account. Yeah, and then I guess the last one is who funded the traffic study? Because I know it was a big issue last time, the cost. Then I'm hearing the city at least laid out the outlines for it. So I think who paid for it? Does it consider Parker Street and some of the neighborhood streets? And does it consider at all like just the absolute gridlock? I know you're looking at volume, but are you looking at the gridlock and the time of travel?
Yeah, a little bit to unpack there. I'll try to take it point by point. So I think the first question you had was relative to how do we get the traffic numbers these facilities generate, and why did my number perhaps not jive with the number that Phil had pointed out. First off, our number is based on industry data, and it's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it's based on surveys of existing facilities that identify for a size of facility how much traffic you can expect to generate. And we've actually done some empirical work on sites that have been opened up in Massachusetts, compared the localized data to what you see with the industry data, and quite frankly, the data is quite similar. So that was the basis for our assessment numbers that we project. I think the point that Phil was making was simply that when people come to these facilities, it's not like you go in a Target, you're going to spend an hour in there, pushing a red cart around. You're in, you're out, and it's typically, a 10-minute, maybe it's 15 minutes at most. So I think the point he was trying to make simply was that because of how quickly these spaces turn over, that the spaces that are afforded this project have the capacity to accommodate up to whatever the number was that he cited, 70. But that wasn't to say that was in conflict or dispute with my number. It was simply to say that these spaces turn over quickly and that there's ample supply there, which is what we had pointed out. So I think that was your first question. The second question relative to the parking, when we went out, we didn't just count the number of spaces along Cambridge Street or in the parking lot, behind it to the side of us. We actually counted how many cars parked there as well. And we did it for a total of 7 hours. So we're out there for an entire morning peak hour during the commuter rush, looking at how many cars are there. We went out every 15 minutes and counted it again. We went out there in the evening and we counted all that again. And we went out there on Saturday and did the same exercise. So we literally had someone walking up and down that corridor for 7 hours, looking at how many spaces were filled. And I assure you, at no point in time did we ever get anywhere near a 70% occupancy rate. Not even close. I mean, in terms of the spaces on Cambridge Street, you have a couple spaces that were filled, perhaps in front of the tavern. Walk immediately west of us on our side certainly had some with the office building there. But as soon as you got towards 93, and anyone that has any question, I would suggest you go and take a look at it at any given night. Those spaces are predominantly and almost exclusively open. I mean, typically, a couple times the vehicles that we counted that were parked there were actually Amazon vans that just pulled over. I think the driver wanted a break. So those spaces certainly are not utilized at a high level. They're certainly not utilized at 70%. And again, the demands that we have, we don't even think we need those spaces, but we simply wanted to point out that, hey, within a 2-minute walk of this business, there is ample parking in this area that doesn't involve anything in the residential neighborhood to the north of Cambridge Street. With respect to operations at the ramp, we did look at the operations of the ramp, and we certainly agree that, there are times that the ramp traffic, does back up and that the volumes going west, or rather east towards the ramp, do queue back. But the point we tried to make, and I want to make sure it's understood, is that, we're not disacknowledging that there are some issues today with traffic. What we're pointing out is that our impact is so negligible. When you have a movement that has 700-800 cars an hour and you add 12 to 15 cars, it just simply doesn't move the needle. So yes, we did look at those ramps. We did look at the operations. We have been out there during peak hours, and we do understand the impacts of queuing at certain times when there are peak rushes. But at the end of the day, regardless of how big the bucket is, we're still a drop in the bucket. And that's the point that I think we wanted to make there. So no, we did look at that, and we do understand the issues of queuing and delays, but again, our impact is extremely minimal. A car every minute to every 4 minutes total. And I think that was all you had. I hope that addressed some of the concerns you might have had.
Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to go to Paul and then Maggie. Paul, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. My name is Paul Parisi. I and my brother John Parisi own the property at 90 and 100 Cambridge Street, as well as 116 Cambridge Street. Nikki has been proposing to have her heritage village located at the 116 facility. We bought this property in 1980. At that time, the buildings had been vacant and abandoned for 11 years. There was a fire that burned the building down. It just sat there empty. We renovated the buildings, put our business in there, and grew our business for the last 40 years in that location. And we came to Charlestown because of its public transportation. And at that time, there was no traffic problem in Charlestown. None. You could park, you could drive. There was never a traffic jam. You could almost walk across the street with your eyes closed and not worry. That's changed dramatically. And the major reasons it's changed is the ramp coming off Route 93, which drops, I don't know how many thousand cars a day into Sullivan Square and blocks up that rotary at Sullivan Square. And almost at the same time, taking down the rotary that took cars over Sullivan Square. So you block the ability for cars to drive through Sullivan without hitting traffic, and you added many more cars into the mix by doing that. Plus, you added in the Encore facility and all the other constructions that's happening around us, partners and you name it, construction that's both completed and that's on the drawing board. Boston 2030, Boston wants to develop this area. I get offers every day for my building. They want to put up high-rise facilities on this space, and I've turned them all down. I don't want that to happen in Charlestown because I love Charlestown. I've been here for 40 years. But that's what other people want to do here, and that's what's coming. And someone even mentioned someone's building hundreds of apartments in the area. This little cannabis operation is not going to affect the traffic in Charlestown. It didn't create the problem, and it's not going to be able to solve the problem. The problem can only be solved by the city of Boston, and my understanding is that there's a traffic project in the works which will do all of that. It's going to do an overpass. It's going to redirect traffic. It's going to correct the problems that the city created and that the city can only solve. And by punishing Nikki and her operation, you're not going to get what you want, I don't believe. Because my interests are the same as yours. I'm 100% aligned with you. I don't want traffic in Sullivan Square. People can't get to my business. I can't lease my operation because of the inability of people to park. And it hurts me as much as everybody else in the neighborhood. And if we don't lease to Nikki, if she's unsuccessful, if you block her application, we'll end up leasing that building to somebody who doesn't have to be licensed, someone who won't have security, someone who won't have any regulations, they won't have lights, they won't have any of the things we're talking about right now. They won't have to do traffic studies, and they'll bring in more cars, more traffic, and more of the problems you don't want. So, I think that our interests are aligned here. I think that Nikki and her operation will be a benefit to the community. I think that the city has to move ahead at full speed with all of its projects to solve the traffic problem. And I think that the community needs to give Nikki a chance, because she's someone who I have supported her. She hasn't paid rent in a year because she hasn't been able to, and we've supported her, and we think that she'll be a good thing for the community. And I'd like to also add that my name again is Paul Parisi. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'd be happy to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to go to Maggie and then Karen and then Brendan. Maggie, you're unmuted.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, awesome. So my name's Maggie Supri. I'm here to speak on behalf of the entire Supri family from Charlestown and to echo the sentiments in the 20+ letters of support that my family submitted in favor of the Heritage Club. I know that everybody's saying that nothing has changed, and in terms of the structure of that business plan, nothing has changed because it was thorough and comprehensive from the beginning. But a lot has gone on behind the scenes since you guys saw us in the fall, and a lot of things have changed. And I think Bill Conroy's testimony speaks to that. Nikki has been advocating tirelessly for the Lost Village over the last few months in the long-standing traffic issue and the cut-through issues that you guys deal with. Nikki's had several sit-downs with BTD to advocate for change and solutions to the problem. And as Bill Conroy said, that progress is in the works. And I believe in large part that's because Nikki has fought for it. She's done more in 3 months than you guys have seen in 35 years. For the first time, you guys are probably hearing that change is coming and that finally people are paying attention. That's because Nikki has been advocating and has been persistent, and she cares, and she's fighting for change because that's who she is and that's what she's going to bring to your neighborhood. She's been the one at bat advocating for you guys when a lot of your leaders have stood by silently and clearly have done nothing for decades. I can tell you for a fact that that's not going to stop because that's exactly who she is. And I know you guys say, oh, she's going to pump money into the neighborhood, and you can gloss over that, but that's not such a bad thing. She's trying to give you guys opportunity. And I know you guys think of her as an outsider because she's not from 02129, but she's a Boston resident. And she's been the one at bat. She's been the one out speaking. And I think you guys now at this point through these Zoom meetings, I think you guys know her enough. And I think it's undeniable that she's brilliant. She's fearless. She's relentless. And she's offering to present your neighborhood with a lot of money and a lot of opportunity, not for Boston, not for Charlestown, but for the Lost Village specifically. I mean, she's who you want on your side. And I think, if this goes through, I hope that you guys can support her because she's an incredible woman. She's an incredible businesswoman. And I mean, she's going to do good things for this neighborhood. And that's my piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm going to go to Karen. You're unmuted. Karen, can you hear us?
Oh, were you talking about me?
Yep, you're unmuted.
Oh,
I saw you have a question.
Oh, no, I just have a couple of questions. One is went to Sean Kelly. When was that traffic study that you did? I may have missed that.
We conducted our study back in February of this year.
February of this year. So those numbers are, actually they're kind of blurred just because of COVID and all that, right?
Yeah, well, what we did is, and we're certainly cognizant of that. And it's a challenge that, quite frankly, we're facing in the industry, is that it's tough to get new data that is, hasn't been impacted because of people working remotely or not working or schools not being in session. So, what we did is we reached out to the BTD and we were able to get some counts that were done before the impact of COVID. And then we were able to use those volumes to adjust our volumes that we collected in February to basically bump them up so that they match what was out there before COVID had hit the area.
Right. So and again, I'm just going to echo all of my neighbors. And this response, I've lived here all my life, same street, different house after a number of years. Can't express the same, I express the same issues that Brian has, that Anne Marie has. I will say that I was unaware of this meeting tonight. There was no community outreach done that I was aware of. I never received a flyer or any informational piece to say that this meeting was tonight. And quite frankly, I was pretty perturbed that this meeting was the same time and schedule as the 201 Rutherford Ave. As you know, this is a very small town. So everyone is involved in everything that happens. And just like this is a major project, that one is as well. And it affects all of us. So that's one thing. I know it was David Lucier that actually told us, the Sullivan Square group that we have, that this meeting was happening tonight. So there was no community outreach with that. I am offended with Mr. Parisi. I picked up a little threat in his tone that if we don't go along with this proposal, that he will basically rent it to whomever. That's not a good neighbor. So as someone who has lived here her entire life, prior to 1980, when you purchased that property, I'm extremely offended by your comment. I don't know where you live. And I don't know if you deal with what we deal with here up in this neighborhood, but I would be happy to sit down and chat with you anytime you want to. So those are my comments. And to Bill Conroy, who I know extremely well, worked with him through the city, to take that leg out up on Broadway and expand the dog park, I think it's a good idea. It will stop some of the cut throughs that are happening on Mount Pleasant. However, the city gave that dog park to Mezzo in a land agreement. So if they're going to expand the dog park, it should be expanded for everyone in the neighborhood, not just for the tenants that live in Mezzo, because that's what they are. They're tenants. They're not homeowners. So thank you, Patrick, and thank you to everyone.
If I can just talk for a second about the outreach issue. The city offered us some times to do this. We chose one that worked for us. As far as notifications, we got the abutters list from the city, and we sent notice to everybody. If you're not within 300 feet, that may be why you didn't get it. But we followed all of the requirements about who we're supposed to notify. I'm glad you did at least receive notice of this and were able to come down. So thank you.
Yeah, and I know Charlestown is, I don't represent you for the mayor's office. I know it's a small neighborhood, so all of you are very actively involved. If you do fall outside of the 300 feet, if you'd like to shoot me an email, I'm happy to keep you in the loop on next steps throughout this process. And I'm going to put my contact information in the chat at the end of this. I'm going to go to Brendan, and then Tim, and then Dustin. So Brendan, you are unmuted.
Hi there. So I'm on Parker Street. Just a few comments and questions. Comments, obviously I'm echoing everybody with the traffic, but you guys are saying you want to be part of our Lost Village neighborhood, create a trust for us, but you didn't even send us flyers. I don't understand why you didn't do that. You're not even reaching out beyond 300 feet. So it doesn't feel like you're trying to be part of our community, and maybe you are, but that's just how it feels. We were hoping you'd be able to help solve our problems, and now you're just saying, well, we're not going to contribute to your problems. So it's just, I think we're all feeling pretty offended by that. The only proposal you proposed was don't take a right on Red, but you didn't do a traffic study at Brighton Street. Why wasn't that done? Obviously pre-COVID it is so much worse here than pre-COVID. It'll go right back to normal. We have 18 wheelers coming down this street, and it just locks it up all the way to Somerville. So my question is, what happened to the parking lot off Clifton Place? I didn't see that today. Has that been taken off? Because I remember that being there from before. Chris had asked earlier who funded the traffic study, so I don't think we got an answer on that. And I had another question. You have Charlestown residents as being part of your employees, which is great, but are they going to come drive over and park on our streets because you're not letting them park at your lot? We only have Brighton Street and Parker Street and maybe one other little street off Perkins for our parking. So we're very limited in where we can park because Somerville's right there. So those are my questions. My wife is here too. She has questions.
I just have one comment. The comment is that, you know, you keep saying you're trying to be good neighbors. You are listening to everything we say. But from the last meeting, everything we said was Brighton Street and Parker Street is very heavily affected by traffic. Do a traffic study there. You go ahead and do a traffic study, but it is focused all on Cambridge Street. I mean, what happened there, right? Like you say you're listening to us, but we're not being heard. And whether it is Nikki not hearing us or the city not hearing us, but we are not being heard here.
So if I can respond to a couple of things, I'm not sure about the comment that we're not contributing. We're trying to, and I think we've laid out some programs. The city is the one that funded this traffic study. The city, we worked with them to ask them. They have a lot of expertise, the BTD, in doing these types of things. We asked them what they thought the scope should be. They provided their expertise with this. You know, we relied on that. And, you know, beyond that, I'm not sure. We understand the concerns. We're not going to have our employees park in the neighborhood. We have a lot of ideas for doing that. We can subsidize their transportation. We can even shuttle employees or do ride shares with people. There's quite a few things we can do to ensure that our employees are not impacting your neighborhood parking as well.
I just want to add one thing is, so when I reached out and asked for the study, I thought it was going to include all of those streets, but the way it was designed by the experts was to not include those streets. I don't know why. You'd have to reach out to the city on that, but I made sure they got it done because, as I told you guys before, I couldn't afford it. So I went to the channels to make it happen. And I think that if we keep reaching out, there might be something that can be done, but I know that Brighton Street is getting addressed as part of the $295,000 gaming grant that Encore gave. So I know that street in particular should have some things going on, and the goal is that they will actually help. And as far as like community, I know Leslie Hawkins said that the funds are sent to the community. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I believe up until $1 million is in the equity fund. That's where those funds go initially, and then after that, 0.5% of that goes to the equity fund. So if the 3% fund goes to Boston, I don't believe all 3% of that goes to the community. And that's why I set up that trust. And the other reason I set up the trust is because I don't live there, you guys know better than I do where the money should go. I'm not going to come in and say lights are the solution. As you guys can see, other people who have the control of the money don't hear you guys. I'm setting up a committee where you guys get to decide how these funds get used, and you guys know how best to use them. So that's why it's done that way. So you don't have the same problems that you have now.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm going to go to Tim and then Dustin and then Kim. So Tim, you are unmuted. Tim? All right, I'll come back to Tim. Dustin, you're unmuted.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I have a comment and a couple of questions. I've been in the neighborhood for about 6 years now. So first, the comment, I agree with any concerns about Stark Street. In particular, it's a confusing intersection given its offset from Parker Street, and I'd ask that any increased usage of it be done so carefully, both from a pedestrian and a traffic, a traffic perspective. Second, the question regarding your security policies with respect to adjacent areas. People frequently loiter outside of the adjacent bar and liquor store, oftentimes smoking. Do you anticipate any difficulties enforcing your policies given the adjacent bar and liquor store or are they too far away to be of concern for your business? And third, I just want to say some businesses in the area, although certainly not all, don't do a great job of maintaining their own properties, let alone contributing to efforts to improve the neighborhood, like participating in the neighborhood cleanup or advocating for the area from Sullivan Square to your location. What will your community leadership look like from a boots on the ground perspective in terms of improving the neighborhood? That's all.
So a lot of this, I sort of group a little bit of that in terms of, maintaining the area around us. We cannot, just like a liquor store or a bar can't control people when they get off the premises. We're all under that same situation. We probably have a little higher burden in that regard because the state regulations require us to ensure that, for example, there's no on-site consumption. And we take additional steps to be vigilant about where our customers are going and warn them not to be creating a nuisance in the neighborhood. This is all part, we can lose our license if we allow those types of behaviors to go on our watch. And so we have to take it seriously, and that's why we do patrol the grounds outside and remain vigilant about what's going on in our area. Not a lot of businesses have to do that, quite frankly. We do, and we will. And so, and other things, of not having littering. It's something as simple as that. We've got to maintain this facility without nuisance to the neighborhood, or we lose our license. That's the way the regulations are. So I think you should have some assurance. It ultimately costs quite a bit of money to get a license in the city of Boston, or for that matter, in any community, because there's so many development costs to doing these types of businesses, and all of the licensing and all of the engineering, architects, etc. It's just not something you go into and then just let everything outside the facility diminish. You've got to maintain it. It's just one of the key aspects of this under our regulations.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Chayla from the Office of Economic Development. She just has a quick comment.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make a small correction about the 3% going to the equity fund. The 3%, as Attorney Delaney Hawkins stated, the 3% goes directly to the community. The city is taking a matching 3% from other sources of the cities. And that matching percentage is what's going into the equity fund. There's a time period for that, and it goes from the matching 3% down to 0.5% during the duration of, I believe it's until 2024 or until the fund reaches $5 million. So I just wanted to make that clarification that the HCA funding, or the HCA fees, excuse me, are not going directly towards the equity fund. Thank you.
Thanks, Chayla. I'm going to circle back with Tim. He had some technical things. So Tim, you're unmuted, and then I'm going to go to Kim and then Sandy. So Tim, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of some of my neighbors. I thought there could have been more done in terms of reaching out and making sure we all knew about the meeting. I think, I tried to search on the website and email a bunch of different places, called different people, city clerk, neighborhood services. I didn't even know Quinlan was gone. Tried to find out what the situation was with the 31 Cambridge location, which does, we have to be informed. I mean, we're a community here and we can't make decisions unless we're informed. So, I mean, some of this information just has to make its way to the community. And I just found it really hard to try and find information about that location. Also, we're seeing a lot of, I've heard on a few occasions, we followed the requirements. And that just sounds like a lot of, we did the bare minimum kind of thing. Like, you got to go above and beyond. You got to listen to the people who are in the community, people who have lived here for a long time and who know what the traffic situation is. And I know that it was kind of the bare minimum because you didn't even mention Parker Street or Brighton Street in your traffic study. That was mentioned at the last meeting. So I don't know, I can't wrap my head around how that happened. And I just wanted to say those few things. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to go to, I don't know, Phil or Nikki, sorry, do you want to address that?
No, I think we've addressed it in previous. We hear it. We understand it. We do the things that we are asked to do. And in terms of the traffic study, we rely on the professionals for that from the city. You know, and I don't know what more to say about it than that. Obviously, we are not experts in traffic management. That's why we went to the city for assistance, and the city worked on figuring out what scope of work should be done and is paying for it. Somebody earlier said, you know, that we're the ones that hired them and they're sort of painting everything rosily for us. That's not the case. We didn't hire them. The city's the one that made that decision and, you know, paid for the work.
Okay. I'm going to go to Kim, then Sandy, then Mary. So Kim, you're unmuted.
Hi. I live on the corner of Parker and Brighton. I've lived there my whole life, and I, agree with everything that my neighbors have to say. And I didn't get any communication about this meeting until I got the email from David, which is concerning. And I know there's just a lot of things going on. The cars whipping across the corner between Brighton and Parker at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I can't even get out of my driveway. My son almost got ran over coming home from the bus stop because there's no crosswalks. I mean, I know the traffic is our problem, but it's just, I don't know. I just feel like this is something we don't need in the neighborhood. We really don't need it, and I can't support it. And it's, I don't want to go over what everyone said, but I don't think really in the end people really care about what happens in our neighborhood. Because like Brian said, we've been asking for all this help all this time. Now all of a sudden you want to be in there, and then all of a sudden we're getting lights and things like that. We just don't need a business like this in Sullivan Square. Maybe it needs to be somewhere else in Charlestown, but I definitely can't support it. I work hard to live here and I want to continue to live here. I don't want to have to move because of things like this. And this is what happened. We're being forced out and squeezed out because people are selfish and giving us 3% of what? I mean, I don't think that our neighbors even care about any of that. I'd rather have nothing. So, that's just my take.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to go to Sandy and then Mary and then back to Brian. Sandy, you're unmuted.
Oh, hi, thank you. I just want to, I agree with my neighbors. I think it would be great if you could involve us a little more in the decisions that are being made, especially in terms of the traffic. I live directly on the corner of Parker Street, so I hear the cars that start coming at 5 in the morning and it goes till 9 in the rush hour. Now, I did my own study the other morning. For 5 minutes, I counted the cars that turned the corner onto Parker Street. There were 26 in 5 minutes. 23 of them came from 93. 3 were from the neighborhood. Now, I do have a question for Bill. So there is a restriction on the turn coming off of Mount Pleasant into our neighborhood from 6 to 9 in the morning. Somerville's been enforcing that in the last week or so, but they usually don't do that. I'm not sure why they're doing it all of a sudden, but I think we need to take a look at that. That is not enforced. And I don't know if that's Somerville's problem or Boston's problem. But so, and you made a comment, Bill, too, about doing a study about the traffic formation and the way you have the streets aligned here. I will tell you, about 2 weeks ago, a plow took the corner on Caldwell Street and took out an entire fence. Thank God nobody was walking on that sidewalk. And also, removing the one-way up into Somerville is a disaster, in my opinion. I watch cars fly up that one-way constantly. It becomes a cut through to 93. So I would plead with you to include us that live in the neighborhood if you're going to do any changes to the current flow of what's going on here in the neighborhood. I mean, a new business, I would welcome it, but we need to address this because it's going to bring more traffic. So that's really all I had to say, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sandy. Sorry. Mary and then Brian. I think Mary might have jumped off. I'm gonna go to Brian and then just circle back and see if Mary comes back on. Brian, you're muted.
Thank you. This is Anne Marie. I asked a question earlier that I didn't get answered, so I just want to clarify with Nikki if she intends to go forward with an application by the end of the month.
Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over that. Yes, I do if I'm able to get a letter from the counselor.
Okay, and I'm also going to ask Mr. Kelly if you will have those figures that you thought you could pull together with regard to how many actual trips will come to the store on a weekly basis for us.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. And again, I think it's important, and maybe I didn't, I failed in terms of, representing why we do the studies the way that we do. Yeah. And the bottom line is that, the reason we look at the morning and the evening and the Saturday peaks is that we want to look at the busiest period of the road, and then look at what the combination of the busiest existing traffic volumes plus the busiest hours of the store. And it creates kind of the worst case scenario. I mean, we can give you how much, volume we do at 2 in the afternoon or at, 8:30 in the evening, and it's gonna be less than during those peak hours. That's why we look at that. It's not that we're trying to, ignore the other hours of the day. The bottom line is we look at the worst case scenario, make sure that operationally we don't have an impact there. Understanding that during the other time periods, the impacts are less, but we can certainly, go through the daily numbers and give you that estimate. It's certainly gonna be higher than the peak hours, but we can provide that for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I see a couple questions about timelines and process in the Q&A section. So I'm just going to jump back to Attorney Hawkins to discuss the BCB timelines.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for everyone who's still hanging on with us here tonight. So in terms of the timeline, once there is a completed application, they will be put on the next available agenda because this is an equity applicant, and the board's charge is ensuring that equity applicants are heard at at a quick rate. I will say that as part of that, there will be a legal notice placed, and all abutters within a 300-foot radius will be notified. Even though Quinlan Locke is no longer with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, and we do thank him for all of his hard work, we will make sure that any hearing notice is pushed out to all of the neighborhood associations and all interested parties, and Pat is here to ensure that happens. But we will work diligently to ensure that there is appropriate notice to the community. But at this time, we can't predict what that hearing notice, that hearing schedule will be.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Wesley and then John and then David. So Wesley, you're unmuted.
Thank you. My name's Wes. I grew up in the neighborhood, 55 years. So I guess I come at this with a more hardened position. As we're going through the process, you keep hearing things about the process is fair and equitable. The fact that 2 proposals are on this side of the rotary tells me that it's not equitable and fair to our neighborhood. We're being told that we have to accept at least one of them. I don't see it that way. I don't think, my position is I don't want either or in the neighborhood. I have 2 9-year-old boys, and speaking to other parents in the neighborhood, we just don't want a pot shop, and that's the short of it. Mr. Silverman, he made a statement about, why are we talking about the size? It's about turnover. That is true, but one thing that concerns me is the owner of the property does own a very large industrial building right next door. So I see this retail, these things do very well. If it does well, now we expand, now we get the supply chain from beginning to end. And I think the last thing, when we talk about, some of my neighbors, yeah, we don't need money thrown at it. But if you want to talk about it, at 3% of net profit, once you throw in that word net, it may not be that significant coming our way. So for those points, I do not want that pot shop in my neighborhood.
Thank you. John, I'm going back to you. I think you're unmuted. I think this is the correct John.
John, this is John Parisi, one of the owners of 190 and 100 Cambridge Street in 116, my brother Paul. So the first thing is that I'd like to ask Mr. Conroy a question that we've heard about the Sullivan Square initiative, which is to solve or rectify some of the previous designs done in Sullivan Square, and which is to, one, eliminate cars coming from Boston going into Sullivan Square to get to 93 and other parts past Charlestown, and then to also limit the cars coming off of 93 down through Sullivan Square to get into Boston as well, that go down by the community college. And I believe that there's a project that is slated to start sometime this year that will do that. And if he could expand on that a little bit, I believe it's going to change the way cars are able to get into Charlestown. It's going to eliminate the total number of cars coming into Charlestown, so people won't have to cut through. I think they were planning on changing some of the roadways so that access through the Lost Village, through that Parker Street, Marfa Way, would be eliminated. So if he could comment on that. And then as far as my brother and I are concerned on the property, we've had that building now for a couple of years. We're not getting any rent revenue from owning that property. But if the project doesn't go through, we're not threatening anything. It's just that it's business. We need to lease that building out. Now, a perfect thing to be there would be like 7-Eleven, especially since Cobble Hill was closed down a few years ago. There isn't a variety store other than the gas station and the liquor store on all of Cambridge Street and down through in Washington Street down into Union Square. So we could put that there. We've had people approach us. So would the amount of cars that maybe would be from a variety store, maybe that would be worse, maybe it wouldn't. But we need to, we're doing what's economic for us. We're not threatening the neighborhood. We're not threatening our neighbors. We try to be good neighbors. We got the MBTA to get rid of all of the overgrowth and brush at the end of our property up towards the, where we had a problem with vagrants and graffiti, which still is a problem. We pay to get that cleaned up all the time. We keep our sidewalks clean. We plow the snow. I personally go around in my truck and I'm cleaning snow in Sullivan Square. I go all around our buildings and properties. So, we do a lot to try to, help things for the neighborhood. So anyways, if Mr. Conroy could talk about the Sullivan Square initiative, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. We will, Bill, I know, I think he's still up. Bill, I don't know if you want to address anything.
Yes, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. So there's a whole other project that's going to happen in for Rutherford Avenue. Okay, it's $175 million project. A lot of people know about it. It's a real project. That project's going to get underway somewhere around maybe the September 2022, maybe a little bit later than that. It's going to reconfigure Sullivan Square. It's going to create a grid system there. But in no way are we going to be preventing people to be using Cambridge Street, Marfa, or Broadway. We're creating a grid system in Sullivan Square. We're keeping the underpass in Sullivan Square as well. We're keeping the Austin Street underpass as well. We are making a roadway diet. And that is a whole nother that's a whole nother level of a meeting. And that meeting, just so the people on this call, that would be a 25% public hearing with Mass DOT. I'm hoping that we would have that public meeting sometime in April now. But that's that project. And as I alluded to earlier, I'm doing everything in my power to get the 6 locations that I spoke about earlier for the Lost Village completed by this fall. So we would start the fall. I have a commitment by the chief on that. It looks as though it's a go. And we can have a sidebar meeting on that as well. I mean, I understand the communities, I can understand they're upset. I can understand we had a lot of detours over there with GLX. I think they did somewhat of a good job with the signage, but I hear the community. So, and I understand this traffic, and I understand that, Encore is contributing to a lot of that traffic, but the traffic volumes, believe it or not, did not really blow up that I thought they were going to blow up with Encore. At one point in time, just to be clear and frank, I thought with the Encore Casino that the on-ramp would back up to I-93. It would back I-93 all the way back almost into East Boston, into the tunnel. That did not happen. We had preparations for that if it did happen, but it didn't happen. But that's not to say that people aren't impacted in this area. So I want to be clear. So we have the 6 location intersections that we'll have a meeting with. I'll bring someone else with me from Public Works with that meeting. On that meeting, we'll discuss what we plan on doing in the Lost Village. And then as I alluded to with the larger project with Mass DOT and Federal Highway, that's a whole nother level. So that project, as I said, somewhere later in 2022, 23, and that's a 4-year project, 4 to 5 year project. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I am going to go to David and then Nancy, and then there's a few final questions or comments. David, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Bill, actually, that's kind of what I was going to ask about. If maybe, I don't know if it's possible. I was texting some of our community members during this call when we heard about this, this money allocated for our area, and it was a surprise to all of us. I guess depending on what you're planning, it might ameliorate some or many of our concerns with this proposal. If there's any way to get that community hearing with this group about what's planned before, the end of the month timeline for Nikki, I think that would be very helpful. There's a lot of us who would be interested in hearing what's being planned for our area. That's all I have.
Thank you, David. I'm going to go to Nancy. Nancy, you're unmuted. Nancy, did you have a question?
Oh, I didn't have a question so much as a comment about the notice for this meeting, because we have and we've talked to neighborhood services and BPDA about this before, about trying to make sure we're not scheduling too many meetings in a week, and these are 2 conflicting meetings in one night. So I'm wondering what you, and I know this, I don't want to take away from the people that need to ask questions about this. I've been, listening in on some of it, but the city has to do a better job. We're a small neighborhood, and we've got a lot going on here. We have 3 very large development projects. We've got this. We have, a number of smaller development projects, and there's just a lot going on, and we can't keep doing this, especially. This is a hearing where we should be able to ask a lot of questions, and in the meantime, do we choose that, or do we choose how Bunker Hill Mall is going to be redeveloped, right? So what can the city do about that? And I see you sent me like a little note to ask the Cannabis board, but you guys all work together for the city. I can't run around trying to coordinate your schedules.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Nancy. I totally understand it. I know, like I said, I covered Dorchester. There's a lot of similar BPDA projects, community meetings all happening at the same time. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I apologize for any inconvenience. These meetings are scheduled based on ONS calendars. There was, Quinlan leaving, someone had to pick it up. I'm facilitating this meeting. Looking forward, I'll pass along that message to our office superiors.
And Pat, just to jump in here from the cannabis board perspective, we completely understand that there are many things going on in your communities and there are many independent boards, right? There's the licensing board, the zoning board, the BPDA. There are so many things happening, and we get that. And that's one of the reasons that we're really working hard to make our hearings, even during COVID, as accessible as possible. So again, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, when an application comes before the cannabis board, we're going to really push hard to get that information out to the community. And again, there is no additional weight. And I want to make this very clear when you're testifying, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of our boards because I'm the attorney for a number of them. There's no additional weight given to spoken testimony than there is to written testimony, right? So sending an email has just as much impact and is given just as much weight as actually appearing. So we just want to make it very clear that we understand everyone has very busy schedules, and we understand that, and we're trying to make all of this as accessible as possible.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm gonna go to, your name just shows up as M. Supri, so I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but M. Supri and then Chris. You're unmuted.
Hi, my name's Mary Supri, and I have been, involved with Nikki when Maggie was involved. And I just want to say, I'm in full support of the Heritage Club. Traffic was an issue, and that was the main issue at the November meeting. And now Nikki has killed herself bringing all of this information, and all of these people's on board. And the neighborhood's still not happy. What I'm hearing is, I'm not hearing anything about what a great, job Nikki is doing in trying to do everything for the neighborhood. All I'm hearing is about traffic, which Nikki can't change that, and it's only a small, it's not a large business. Like, all I can think of is, I lived down there on 29 Brighton Street for many years, and something worse could go in over there, which would make the neighborhood traffic even crazier. I mean, what happens if the Bunker Hill Community Health Center decided to put a much larger building down there? That's going to truly impact the traffic. The girl gave them a study, and it's still not good enough. And I just don't think that's fair to her.
Thank you, Mary. I am gonna go now to Chris. Chris, where is your, hold on, sorry. Chris, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I just had a follow up on the traffic study, and so just even to Mary, I think everyone in the community feels neglected because we just found out about this. Like, there was no outreach, and I think, to reiterate your prior point, it feels like the bare minimum. And so going back to the traffic study, I just want to know, was there any consideration given to the fact that this will be within 1 mile of a casino? I know you use other Massachusetts properties as comps. So is there any consideration given to the fact that it's less than a mile from a casino?
Sean, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe you can clarify what your concern is relative to the proximity of the casino. I mean, when we did the counts and when we factored the volumes up, we account for the casino traffic. So it's cooked into the analysis, but I'm not sure I'm following what impact the casino's proximity would have, other than that it's near it certainly draws traffic, and we've accounted for that. It's in the counts and so forth, but I'm not sure I understand what other impact it would have.
Yeah, I question it that it's actually in the account. So I mean, and the other thing too is no one's seen this report other than the couple slides you shared with us tonight. And the city, the casino wasn't even open that long before everything shut down. So I think it's hard to say. I mean, their projections were saying 50,000 cars on a weekend traveling through this area. So if you don't think that the 50,000 people going there over the weekend, if there's not even a small, like 10% of them want to drive up the street, that's 5,000 extra cars on the weekend. I just think it's kind of glazing over the fact that this is going to be the only place a mile away from a casino. And then to kind of like better use of the land, they've been trying to frame a pot shop here for 3 years, or more than 3 years now. It was someone else before this, it's someone else now. Clearly they see value, and to say it's going to be a negligible impact on traffic, I think is a gross misstatement. If you look at what the business projects, there's a reason that they want this location, right? They fought with the neighborhood. They got put down last time because of their lack of connection with the neighborhood, and they're here again because they think there's significant demand and traffic in this location. I mean, if you're not going to open a business unless you think you're going to be able to drive significant foot traffic. I don't.
If I can respond to that again, you're correct. We do think that there's going to be a robust business here. We think it's along the lines of what Mr. Kelly's telling you. We think we'll do very well with that. But he's also telling you that he doesn't think that that's a significant impact on the overall traffic. We're not responsible for the casino traffic. That's a separate issue. What the traffic study is telling you, in my view, is two things. One, yes, we will get traffic that can support this business. And two, it is not a significant impact compared to what's already going on here.
Thank you. And I just make a note about the outreach. I can't speak to outreach beyond the statutory requirements, but this applicant has fulfilled every step of outreach required by the Cannabis Control Commission and the Boston Cannabis Board. They were flyering the neighborhood. They did certify all stores within 300 feet, and they did have a posting in a newspaper of general circulation 2 weeks in advance of this meeting. Outreach beyond that, I can't speak to it, but they have satisfied the requirements for the city of Boston. Are there any, we've reached the point where there are no new hands raised or comments in the chat, and we are 2.5 hours. Apologize, my math, I know. I think we're about 2.5 hours into this meeting. At this point, I think it would be appropriate to end it, and I can put some follow-up information in the chat with my contacts, but I will turn it over to the team and representatives from the city if there are final comments at this point.
And Pat, I just want to jump in there. Again, this is Leslie from the Boston Cannabis Board. We really appreciate both the applicant and everyone who's been present tonight. I am here tonight. I don't attend all the committee meetings, but I know there were a number of procedural questions that were raised, and I want to make it very clear that the Boston Cannabis Board and our staff, we are here for any questions you have as residents. We're here for any questions you have as applicants, but I do want to make it very clear that this applicant has done everything that we've asked them to. That doesn't speak to the merits of their application, but just in terms of any questions about their filings with the board or their notifications of the neighborhood, they have absolutely done everything we've asked them to, and that is legally required. I will also say that the board will take everything into consideration that is submitted. So again, I put the Cannabis Board's email into the chat. Please reach out to us. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone about the process or what the legal requirements are. And we really appreciate, Pat and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services giving us this opportunity to be here, and the applicants and everyone who came to testify. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Phil, Nikki, Sean, I don't know if you have any closing comments. Yeah,
we just want to thank everybody. We we really do hear the comments, and we want to work with you. You know, we take to heart everything you're saying. What we've tried to get across is that the notion that this alone is going to create a lot of additional problems. We don't see that, and you know, this was independently done, a traffic study that I think verifies that. So what we can promise you is if we're fortunate enough to go forward, we will work with you. We're happy, by the way, if you want to reach out in the meantime, before anything else happens, and ask further questions and talk to us. We'd love to talk to you and work with you. You'll have a good partner going forward if we're fortunate enough to be able to proceed here. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to quickly thank everyone for coming. I want to thank my landlords. Part of why I picked this location is because they are patient with me. There's not a lot of opportunities for equity applicants. If you can't pay your rent for a year, there's not a lot of patient people who will allow you to go through the process and go back to the community. They could have easily said, it didn't work out, you're done. But they were really patient, and I appreciate you guys coming back out and spending all these hours sharing your concerns. So thank you, and thank you to the board and BTD and everyone who's here. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, I put my information in the chat. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you with the appropriate next steps and resources that are available. But with that, have a great night. I hope you get some more time to enjoy it. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.